From the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today I'm very pleased joining me, Jamal Ahmed. Jamal, the way I love to introduce people is I keep it to themselves to introduce themselves. I have a theory. No one can tell about someone else better than themselves. So this is why I would say the floor is yours. Of course, I know like many people knows you. You're a very known figure in the field of data privacy. But again, I would leave it to you to introduce yourself to us and tell us more about what you do.
Thank you, Mehmet. I might be the one that proves your theory wrong today, though. So hi, everyone. I'm privileged to be here. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Jamal Ahmed, and I do lots of things, actually. So my first one is I am the global privacy and AI expert at Kazient Privacy Experts. And at Kazient Privacy Experts, we work with medium and large-sized companies and enterprises and governments, and we really support them to build the reputation further, to support the trust, and to make sure that they make a bigger impact by making sure they get all of the things that they need to get right when it comes to data privacy and protection. I'm also the founder of the Privacy Pros Academy. I started that in 2021. And the reason I started that is because I have this vision that I want to create a world where every woman, every man, and every child enjoys freedom over their personal information. And I realized that it doesn't matter what I do with the consultancy. It's just a drop in the ocean, if that. But what I can do to achieve that goal is if I can create a community of world-class privacy professionals around me, if I can empower them to be world-class and get enough people in our community so that we have somebody in every company, every government organization, every public organization around the world, then eventually at some point we will achieve our dream of making sure that every woman, every man, and every child has freedom over their personal information. So I started the Privacy Pros Academy, and that's where I help people to get the practical skills, the knowledge, and the know-how they need to really have a thriving privacy career. I'm also the founder of the Privacy Pros podcast, #1 data privacy podcast. It goes out to 137 countries now in the world. And I'm looking forward to having more of you join us there. So that's what I do professionally. In terms of achievements, you can see this book behind me. I'm the international best-selling author of the Easy Peasy Guide to the GDPR. #1 in India, #1 in Canada, and #1 in the UK. Bestsellers list for 8 months now since release. So alhamdulillah, I'm very grateful for that. And as you can see behind me, I've won multiple awards, Fellow of Information Privacy. I was awarded Best Business Awards. I've also been awarded the Freedom of the City of London by the City of London in recognition of the authorship and of the actual contribution I've made to the City of London when it comes to helping their firms protect data privacy. So lots of fun stuff going on there, lots of achievements, lots of accolades and awards, and I'm very grateful to God first and foremost for all of those. But it just shows that when you put the effort in, you can achieve whatever you want. Like when you look at my background, there's nothing amazing, there's nothing that stands out. In fact, I probably shouldn't be where I am right now. But if you put the effort in, if you figure out what the 80-20 is of anything, then you can get better results like me because you've got better achievements. I mean, you stand and you start somewhere where I couldn't start and I had to find my way there to begin with. So that's me. Mehmet, I don't know how I did, but you can tell me.
Wow, you did fantastic, Jamal. You shouldn't said like how you would prove me wrong. You proved me right once again, I would say. Of course, there are multiple, I would say, perspectives I would love to discuss with you today. But let's start, from your main area of expertise, which is like data privacy. So people, sometimes they know that this issue of privacy exists, whether on the personal side or the business side. But let's focus on the business side today, of course. So given your experience with various sized organizations, what do you think that the biggest challenges, these organizations they face regarding data privacy compliance today?
The biggest challenge, beyond any doubt, is the fact that the cultural awareness or the cultural buy-in for privacy isn't there. Then the CEO, the CTO, the chief privacy officer, whoever you want can care as much as they want about privacy. But unless you empower and you educate and you get every single person in your team, in your organization, across every single country that you're operating in, to also understand why this is important and why this matters, you're always going to struggle and you're going to be up against it. So I think, in my experience, what I found is the number one biggest challenge is making sure that the culture is there. And if the culture is not there, then actually educating and empowering people, making them understand why this is important and what things they should be thinking about when they're dealing with people's information is probably the key to getting things right.
100% on that, Jamal. Like I have some experience in cybersecurity, and of course, privacy comes into the cybersecurity, and indeed. But now, one thing that we know is, these privacy regulations, they can change very fast, right? So how do you advise usually, companies to stay ahead of the curve, and ensure they always following these regulations? Like, sometimes I speak with people, they tell me, but it's very hard. Like they change the rules always, all the time. Is there any tips or techniques I would say they can, implement so they can stay ahead of the curve?
That's a great question. And it's also a challenge that I hear a lot, especially on LinkedIn and people and networking events and industry events is, they're always changing and new laws are coming in. Like, especially if you're a multinational company, can you imagine being a multinational company? You've got the GDPR in Europe, then in America, you've got different states coming up with different things. And then in the Middle East now, we have the PDPL as well. India's got their own laws. Africa's bringing laws. I think just yesterday, Ethiopia had the vote on their new data protection laws, which has just got passed as well. So yes, it's a rapidly evolving sector. Everything is changing all the time. But it's only mediocre privacy professionals and mediocre programs that have a challenge of actually confronting change. If you have a world-class privacy program, what you will do is you will map everything to the highest requirements. And all you have to do is look at the OECD guidelines, right? Go back to the OECD guidelines, map that, and then build your privacy program based on those principles. Now, if you build a privacy program based on those principles, 80 to 90% of every single requirement that comes out in every data privacy law, you'll already be compliant with it. There might be some tweaks that you need to make. So, for example, let's say the OECD guidelines, they talk about the need for transparency. So we know that if we have privacy notice that covers where you collect information from, who you share it with, what you do with it, how long you store, what rights are, blah, 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 then that's going to be compliant. And every other privacy law that comes in pretty much asks you to do the same thing. The only challenges I found is if I'm dealing with the jurisdiction of Australia, there's one other thing that we need to add. And if we're dealing with California residents, then obviously we need to have that do not sell or do not share my information button as well. But if you build a world-class privacy program and you identify all of the different jurisdictions, all of the different requirements, and you map it all back to the most stringent requirements, and for me, that's the OECD guidelines, and you base it on those principles, and it doesn't matter what happens, what changes, your program is going to be fit for purpose. You just have to make one or two slight tweaks. You won't lose any sleep over it. There's nothing to stress about, but you have to be a world-class privacy professional, and you got to think a big picture from the beginning. And I think that's where the challenge lies, is most people, they don't go and find the right mentors. They don't have the right people in their networks, and they just rely on what they know and what people around them know, which might not be the best practice when it comes to global programs or even programs that are multi-jurisdiction.
Absolutely, Jamal. Now, I know that you interact with some clients here in Dubai, in the UAE. So you mentioned that there are some cultural issues, and these can be present some challenges. But at the same time, the region is changing very fast, especially the UAE. So what do you think the key steps? Here we talk about both, like even maybe startups up to the enterprise level companies. So how they can ensure also they are like compliant on the local and international level at the same time, like from data protection standard perspective.
That's a very good question, because when you come to Dubai, you see how multicultural, how diverse it is. And one of the things that you'll see is there's lots of people there from Europe. Now, if you're dealing with data from European residents, whether they're there for a short time or they're there on holiday, then you might find that you're also in scope of the GDPR. And that means Europeans can actually exercise those rights, but they have certain expectations about what you will do as a company in the Middle East with their information, which they're used to for the rest of their lives. So the challenge comes is, okay, in Europe, they see privacy as a basic human right. They've had the data protection laws around for a long time now. So they're very mature. And then when you come to somebody like Dubai and you see the workforce, a lot of the workforce is actually from countries like India, from countries like the Philippines, where they haven't had this level of maturity with the data protection laws at home. And now you're bringing them into a region where there isn't existing data protection laws. It can be challenging. The other thing is, when we spoke to people in the Middle East, one of the things they said is, look, we believe that we are being monitored most of the time by our governments anyway. It's just the way things are here. And so if we was to invest in our privacy or our security or our privacy, let's say, we're more likely to spend money building a tall fence than we are about what's happening technology-wise or with our phones, for example, because we know all of those things are being observed. So you've got to kind of appreciate what are the different challenges, the different mindsets that people have and where they come from and what's important to them or what they perceive to be important to them. But that doesn't mean that we forget about the people that we're trying to deal with, we forget about people trying to serve, because there's also research that shows, especially if you're a startup, that people now value their privacy more than most other things. In fact, data is the most valuable commodity at the moment. If data is the most valuable commodity, that means privacy is the most valuable currency that we have right now. And what you need to think about is, what's the currency that you're trading with? And how much of the privacy currency do you actually have in your wallet? If you don't have enough of that privacy currency, it's time to take a look and say, what are the things that I can do to make sure that when people are interacting with me, they understand that we take their privacy seriously. But don't take my word for it. Go and look at companies that spend billions of pounds on researching what matters to individuals, like Apple, like Amazon, and see, why are they taking out advertising space? Why are they buying spaces and advertising the message that they care about your privacy? How are they selling so many cell phones without talking about the features of the phone, without talking about the value, without talking about the battery life, but just saying, we care about your privacy? And when you go and you do your research and you realize, hang on a minute, there's so much to gain. We can actually get a competitive advantage by looking at these things. It becomes amazing what you can actually achieve just by showing to your customers that you care, so that they have more of a reason to trust you over your competition.
Now, you mentioned, the example of Apple, and of course, I've seen a lot of ads, about companies that they tell their audience that you should care also about privacy for many reasons. But if you want to think about it from, I would say, a little bit business perspective, do you agree with me, Jamal, that when me as a company, whether I'm a startup, and let's say startup, right? And I like to focus on startup because young entrepreneurs, sometimes they are in rush to do many things, so they forget about some important stuff. Protecting privacy, and I want to hear your opinion on this. To me, if a company is trying its best to protect my identity from being leaked into the hands of the wrong guys, that means they care about me. So here, data privacy and implementing data protection, it's not only for the sake of protecting the company itself, it's actually a way to establish kind of a trustworthy relationship between them as a company and their vast majority of the customers that they will be dealing with. Can I put it in this perspective, Jamal? Do you agree with me on that aspect?
I agree with you 100%. That's essentially what it comes down to. So look, we're talking about the Middle East here, right? The most dominant faith around the Middle East is Islam. And if you look at data protection laws, the earliest data protection law you'd probably come across is the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, 1950s. And that came as a result of the atrocities that Europeans committed against other Europeans, right? But if you go back 1,400 years, more than 1,400 years ago in the deserts of Saudi Arabia, and you go back to the beginning of the time of the Prophet ﷺ, what you find is privacy was established. That's the first time we see privacy established. And actually, if you go into the Quran and you look at Surah Light, you can see that's when privacy, physical privacy, all of those boundaries are established. And so we can see Islam gave us privacy. And so if Islam has given us privacy and is part of the fabric of society, what does that actually mean? It means that when someone trusts you with something, the amana, you have a duty to look after it. So if they're trusting you with their personal information, their passport, their phone number, their email address, their medical history, their habits, their bad habits, whatever information they're trusting you with, you have a duty to keep that trust and honor that trust. And the moment you stop focusing on your responsibility to uphold that trust, that's the moment that you've actually violated their right to privacy and you've not held that trust. Now, the thing is, as a young startup business, the most important thing that you can figure out, or the most important thing that you have, is your reputation, right? Your staff will come and go, your assets will come and go, you create them. The one thing that you can't control and the one thing that you work so hard for is your reputation. But if something happens where one of your employees makes a mistake, where you're working with a company and you haven't done your research and something happens when you share information with them, that is going to ruin your reputation. And that's something that you're going to work so hard to build and you can never, ever do anything about it. For example, if you look at British Airways, they had a massive data breach here in the UK. But guess what? It wasn't British Airways' fault. It was one of the companies that they were working with. In fact, it was the baggage handling company. One of their employees had their password violated, but because British Airways didn't actually have segregation, once you're in their system, you have access to everything. They had responsibility to make sure that they damaged and mitigate against that limit. They hadn't thought about it. And you can see just by working with a company, another big company that they thought knew their stuff, that they thought wouldn't cause them any problems, has ruined their reputation and it's cost them billions. It was undisclosed what the settlement was, but we can see on the share prices, it affected them significantly. Now, obviously, as a startup, you're not a listed company yet, but that's what you're trying to get towards. Who is going to want to invest their money and back a company who has a poor reputation, who the public don't trust, who stakeholders won't trust, investors won't trust you? And at the same time, to get a startup off the ground and to really start scaling up, you need to have the best talent around you. Who's going to want to work for a company that's got a tainted reputation? So it all comes down to the reputation that you have and what you're saying about the trust that's placed in you. If someone can't trust you with their data, why should they trust you with their money?
100%. I can't agree more with you, Jamal. And again, two things, I can, from my humble experience, share. So you mentioned something very important about what we call it in like the cybersecurity jargon, the supply chain effect. So because sometimes, to the example you gave about British Airways, so it's like, when my father taught me to drive, he said, like, you should be taking care of yourself and taking care of the others, because you need to assume that they might do mistake, not only you. So it's the same thing, right? So when you drive on the road, of course, you should be 100% taking attention of your acts, and you should take attention of other people's acts. So this is exactly, it applies, I think, in the privacy and cybersecurity in general, because of course you might protect your data, whatever measurements you take to make sure the privacy is protected, but you need to take care and ensure that the partners you work with, they also do the same measures. So this is 100%, I agree with you on this one. And regarding, some people I used to discuss with them, they said, okay, so what? We know that they hear us on the mobile phones. We know that they do this. I said, yes, see, like, that's fine. But I try, Jamal, always to give people an example. I say, if, for example, for any reasons, I'm dealing with a fintech company, so I'm giving them my ID, so they have every single detail about me. They have my date of birth. They have everything. So someone, if get this information, he might go and impersonate me. So this is the real challenge, and actually it's a problem. And this is why we have these like very big penalties on companies that they don't comply with the privacy, because they are putting high risks. So it's good, like you shared the slide, Jamal, because it's not something small. And I've seen companies that they vanished because they had some privacy issues. Their data was leaked somewhere on the dark web, whatever, and they were out of business. So thank you for sharing that, Jamal, with us. Now, Another topic which is also top of mind, I would say, related to data privacy and data protection in general, is the rise of AI, of course. And we start to see a lot of stories about, how we can actually prevent data privacy issues when people start to interact with these AI tools, whether it's a ChatGPT or other tools. From your perspective and with your experience, Jamal, how do you see the rise of AI impacting the way data is collected, stored, and used? What you can tell us about that?
That's a great question. And there's so many different areas and aspects to it. But last year, I spoke at the International Data Protection Conference in Lithuania. And the topic I speak about was balancing AI and data privacy. And so when I was speaking about balancing AI and data privacy, one of the things that became very clear is regardless of what I think, regardless of what anyone else thinks, AI is going to be changing the way we know and we do everything. So the question now is, let's accept that change is going to happen, but let's get excited about how we can use AI to make our lives better, to improve our lifestyle, to detect an accident before it's about to happen, to detect a medical condition before it becomes a problem, to make your life much more smoother, to make doing anything much, much more easier, to make things more cheaper for us to be able to get our hands on, because we can automate processes and have a robot doing it instead of paying humans to do it. So there's so many benefits to come across it. But at the same time as it's fascinating, it's also equally frightening when you look at the dark side and what people can do with that. Now, the specific question you asked me, Mehmet, was about when it comes to actual data privacy and AI, what's happening there. Now, the way AI and machine learning works is it sucks in all of this information, and it tries to look for patterns in that information, and then it tries to make predictions based on whatever prompt or whatever instruction is being given. The challenge we have here is we have no idea what's happening with our personal information that's being fed into these AI systems for the machine learning. We also have no idea where they're connecting this information from. And I don't know if you recall the interview with OpenAI CTO where she was squirming. She couldn't ask the question if things were taking off, things like YouTube and Facebook. She just wouldn't answer the question. How can you be the CTO of a company that's producing one of this stuff and not know what information that you're collecting? And don't you think that people like me and you, we have a right to know, hey, if I publish something on Facebook, is somebody going to come and scrape that? If I'm publishing something on LinkedIn, if I'm writing a blog, if I'm publishing an article, if I'm going to give an interview on this podcast, if I'm going to give an interview in a newspaper or a TV show, is somebody going to take that and use it to train their AI system? And if they are, what are they actually training it to do? And how can I make sure that I'm comfortable with that and that I can trust them to do the right thing? Because it could be that they could be taking this information of mine and yours, Mehmet, right now and feeding it to pretend to be us, to go and do fake business with fake companies or convince them to do stuff using our authority and your reputation, right? So there's so many different things that people can do. And I think it was, I can't remember, was it earlier this month or was it last month? It was published that a company or a chief financial director was duped into handing over £1 because he thought he was having meetings with his company and they wanted him to make a payment outside the process. And they had
in Singapore, I believe.
Yeah, they had all of these fake Zoom meetings with AI staff.
Fake.
Yeah, so I mean, it's crazy.
Jamal, you mentioned something. Actually, this question I didn't prepare before, but you triggered something in my mind. Do you think previous events that happened regarding data privacy, because you mentioned Facebook and this is the interview with the OpenAI CTO, and of course everyone was saying, oh my god, that cannot be true, that must be a deep fake of her talking to a journalist. But nevertheless, do you think that these guys or maybe some other AI company, they assume everyone remembers, I hope, what happened a couple of years back with the big scandal of Cambridge Analytica and Facebook, right? So do you think like these AI companies, they assumed, okay, the data is already there, it's our right to go and, do whatever we want with it. And that includes maybe, here's the dangerous part, and this is why we always, I'm sure like Jamal, you advise also people to do the same, don't put everything on the public social media, which is anything which you think that in the future might be a risk for you. So I think these guys, they assume because of previous event, that they can do whatever they want. Do you think that is a logical maybe explanation to the way she answered that question?
Well, I find the way she answered the question quite embarrassing. If I was working for a company or if she was one of my friends, I would find that professionally very embarrassing. Like, you're the CTO, you should know, and you should be able to give clarity on what's going on. If I was the CEO of the company, I'd be very annoyed that, hey, people are not going to trust us now. Like, you haven't given clarity. If there's no clarity, there's nothing to trust you, because we have no confidence in what you're saying and what you're doing. And even her body language, you could see, was like, oh, she didn't want to answer. It's like she knew the question, but she didn't want to answer because she was worried about the repercussions. But not answering actually probably was worse in this situation than saying, yeah, we do. Okay, then people are going to have a problem with that you actually do that. But saying, neither confirming nor denying, it's just opening up more questions and getting people to attack you and the company more. So pushing that to one side, let's just assume she did the best with the knowledge and resources and legally what she was allowed to say without getting in trouble at the time. Like, I have no idea what's going on for her behind the scenes. So I hope she's okay. The interview anyway. Mehmet, coming back to the question, what did you ask me is about
measures we can take, the measurements we can take.
Yeah. So one of the things is, should we put everything out there? So I always say to people here in the UK, at least anyway, if you was to be standing in Oxford Circus train station, Mehmet, you remember? I don't know when the last time you was here was, but if you was to stand in Oxford Circus and you was to hand the information out to people on a piece of paper by yourself, what information would you include on that? If you wouldn't include information on that piece of paper that you're handing out to strangers that are walking past, then don't post that online. Because like this, you can see who you're giving this information to, but online you don't know who's taking it. You don't know how they're going to have it for you. You don't know what they're going to do with it. So if you're not comfortable having this information over to a stranger, then you should not be comfortable publishing that online either.
Yeah, and I know like some companies, but there are a lot of debates on Jamal. Like, one of the things that happened once ChatGPT went out, everyone tried to say, hey, like, don't share company information with ChatGPT. I told people, I said it's hard to monitor that, because how do you know what information they are putting there? There is no easy mechanism to do it. Now, some other people, they started to say, okay, we cannot control the people. Let's try to control the AI companies. And now here there's another debate that like Europe is blamed that they are very strict, this. And here's the voices that started to appear here and there. Oh, if you put a lot of regulations, you're going to kill creativity and you're going to make AI development much slower. What's your take on that, Jamal?
Very interesting question. And there's so many different aspects that we can answer. We can answer from a philosophical point of view. We can answer from a legal point of view. We can also answer from a very pragmatic and operational point of view. So let's start off with the operational point of view first. From the operational point of view is, if you have good data governance in place, if you have good classification, if you have good culture, then everyone will know what information is dealing with, what the classification of that is, and whether they can or can't do something with that information. That's like hoping that everyone gets it and you have good data governance and good classification and everyone understands that, which isn't always the case. Then you have the legal concerns. So yes, I think governments have a duty, they have a responsibility towards the citizens, towards society, to protect them from the harms that could come about from innovation. I mean, we have laws in place. When you go on the road, it's not like, hey, we're stifling innovation, we're stifling how fast the cars can go or how innovative they can be. We have to balance that with safety. So governments have a responsibility, and they need to make sure that they take care of those responsibilities to protect the citizens' well-being for the greater good of society. So I think it is appropriate to have stuff in place. I prefer when those laws are in is more like the GDPR. It's more principle-based. So it's very generic and tells you, think about these in this way, rather than you must do this, you must do this, you can't do that, you can't do that. So I don't like prescriptive laws. I prefer the generic principles. As long as it's within this, then it's tolerable. If it goes beyond that, then we think it's not good for our citizens. So that's what I like from a governmental legal point of view. And from a philosophical point of view, look, there's good and bad people. There's always going to be good and bad people.
Absolutely.
If you find people that AI is a tool, right? AI is a tool. So if the tool gets into the hands of good people, they will amplify that with good energy, and you will see some amazing innovation, things that are going to, really be life-changing, things that are going to help people's lives come into place. But at the same time, when those AI tools go into the hands of bad people, the bad energy that they use to amplify that is going to be horrible. So, for example, if you look at money is a tool. It's neither good nor bad. It can be used for great things. It can be used also for bad things. It can be used to fund genocides, guns. It can be used to liberate people, or it can be used to oppress and commit genocide at the same time. So these are the things that we need to think about. Is when you have tools, the tools are neither good nor bad. The energy that somebody amplifies into the tool, that's what we need to think about. So what are we going to do? Are we just going to let human nature do that? Or are we going to say, as a government, we're going to step in and we're going to try to regulate that as much as possible to stop the people that have bad intentions and who are pure evil, try and put some controls in place or some protections in place or some deterrence in place to protect the good, honest, ordinary citizens of our countries.
Absolutely. And this is, last year, especially when still the AI, I mean, AI, when I say AI, just to clarify, I mean, ChatGPT, AI is there since 50 plus years. So just for the sake of the audience to understand. So when the debates start to heat up, I was telling people the same thing. Like, if you think about the knife is a tool. So your knife, you can, cut the food with it. It makes it easy for you to eat, and you can, like, God forbid, go and kill someone with it, right? So these tools, and I try always to show the positive side of the tool. So this is why I was lucky enough to have a lot of guests who did fantastic things with AI. Just like a couple of months back, I had a guest from the UK, Dev, who's doing the AI in education, which is fantastic. The idea is to bring teacher to every single place on earth. I had Dr. Harvey, 2 weeks ago, and again, he's trying to bring doctor to every patient across the globe, which is fantastic. So, of course, we have the privacy issues. To your point here, where the regulations, the government, should step in and make sure that we are not using these tools in the wrong direction. Now, Jamal, I want to shift gear a little bit because this is a topic close to my heart, honestly. It took me years to understand how important it is, which is storytelling. And I know, like, you have built a brand, around the data privacy, actually. And you use this approach you describe it as easy peasy, right? I'm interested to know, how storytelling played a role in developing your personal brand and making such a complex topic, like all the things we were talking about, easy and accessible to your audience. What's the secret sauce here?
What is the secret sauce here? That's a really good question. So for me, when I do something, I want to make sure that it's effective. And if clients are paying me to do something, if people are coming and they're training, then I want to make sure that they leave with something tangible, but something that stays with them beyond just that session, beyond that week. I want it to have a lasting impression on them. And what I found was the more you tell people stuff, the less the retention period is. But the more you bake that stuff in a way that they remember it, they're more likely to remember that for years to come. And some of the things my students say is, hey, I just passed my exam. It was great. You know what? I was sitting there. I could hear all of the stories that you're telling us about how to answer the question, all of those things. So what we need to understand is people are emotional beings. Right. So logic, yes, there is a logical side of things, but emotion and those emotional triggers actually drive us. And because we're emotive beings, it's the emotional pull that we have to make decisions, and we'll just justify it with the logic. So if we want people to have deep, meaningful shifts, belief shifts, if we want them to pay attention to what we're talking about, if we want to make a lasting impact, and we want to persuade and influence and empower people, then we need to go and tap into the emotional side of the brain. How do we do that? Well, we can evoke those things by telling stories, because when you tell stories, people start imagining things, people start feeling things. And if you can breathe vitality into the things that you're doing, even if it's something as what could be dull or dry as cybersecurity and data privacy, you can add flair and vitality and breathe that fun and energy into it by telling stories. And remember, facts tell, stories sell, and people are likely to remember those stories for years to come because they will associate some kind of feeling with the character or with the problem or with whatever's going in, and it makes them it makes it easier for them to recall those things when they have a situation and they have to either answer a question or they have to deal with the challenge.
Storytelling, as I was telling you, Jamal, is something I learned the hard way. And it was a wake-up call when someone, a couple of years back, asked me this. He asked me, do you remember your lessons in the class? I said, okay, barely I remember. Of course, there are like the things that I use on daily basis. Yeah, I remember them. And then he asked me, do you remember the cartoons that you were watching when you were a kid? I said, yeah, of course. He said, do you know why? I said, why? He said, because it was a story touching your emotions. It stayed in your head even after all these years.
Yeah.
While to your point, when you were going to your math class, they were giving you just facts without any rationale, right? So we are just grabbing information. Probably you have used it, but there was no story behind. He said, this is why you would remember the cartoon, or maybe you would remember a song from your childhood, but you would not remember, like your lessons from school and college even. So that's 100%. And, I learned it, Jamal, and especially when I start to interact more with like tech leaders who they want to grab the attention of their team. They want to start like initiative. I said you should tell them in a story way, not in a fact way. Of course, facts are important. Same I tell to the founders. Tell me your story. Like if you don't have a story, you might have the perfect product, but no one will understand what you're trying to do. So this is why it's very, very important. Now, another thing, Jamal, which has also attracted my attention while preparing, and you are like a kind of someone who joined multiple things at the same time. Like it's a talent, honestly. So I don't think you are also an NLP practitioner. And the NLP is something, very frankly, if you ask me 10 years back, I'll say, no, what is NLP? But of course, when I start to read, that I sit down, I find, it's something important. So tell me, as a practitioner of NLP, how the power of reframing limiting belief, can give us like completely new ways of thinking. And if you can share like maybe a anecdote or a story that can enlighten us about the importance of NLP.
Wow, that's a big question. So I'm very fortunate that I actually came across NLP where I was very, very young, and it's something that fascinated me. And for those of you who don't know what NLP is, NLP stands for not natural language programming, but neuro-linguistic programming, right? So what does neuro-linguistic programming mean? So neuro is brain, linguistic is language, and programming is obviously how we do a pattern or how we run something. So it's how we use language to program our minds. And what most people don't understand is you just think the way you think is the way you think. Well, no, there's a program that you're running. There's a CD that's stuck in your mind and it's on loop. Like, why do you keep getting the same results? Why are you still running the same patterns? Is because you've got a CD in there that's on loop. And what we do with neuro-linguistic programming is we say, hey, you know what? You can actually take that CD out and you can put a CD in that's actually more appropriate to where you are in your life right now. That might help you get better results. That might drive the kind of changes in your habits and your behaviors that you want to get the results that you need. And so neuro-linguistic programming is all about how do I use language to change the results that I'm getting to think differently. And Mehmet, look, the truth is, when you look at my history, you see that my parents, they both are immigrants, uneducated. They came without any education from their home countries to this country. And they did whatever they could. My mom was a homemaker. My dad was a worker. He was doing very low-paid jobs, manual labor jobs. So I'm not someone that had parents that guided me with education. And in fact, when you look at where I was born and grew up, where I grew up, you will see that I grew up in the heart of East London. And I actually grew up in an estate called Ocean Estate. The estate was so bad that the government was given 54 million pounds was given as a national lottery grant to demolish the estate and to build it back up again. Where I grew up, on my staircase would be junkies stealing, junkies taking needles at night, smoking heroin. My neighbors were getting raided by the police every other day. It was normal. That was the reality of my life. And the only thing I could see at the time was the people that were successful were the people who were selling drugs or who were involved in other crime. Like that was my reality. So had I not come across neuro-linguistic programming, I would have been a product of my environment and I should have been ended up in prison. Most of the people I grew up with now, they're either in prison, taking drugs or selling drugs, right? And it's very sad. There's a few people that actually managed to break out of that. But it was only because I found neuro-linguistic programming that I could actually think, hang on a minute, I am limited myself to what I'm thinking is possible for me based on my perceptions. But what if I could change my mind and ask more powerful questions? What if I could actually go to university? What if I could actually be a world leader? What if I could actually help people? What if I could do these things? Right? And listen to the choice of my language. I'm always asking, what if this? Most people, what we do or what we used to do, or what you probably find you're doing is you have an idea, you think of doing something, you think, but what if someone says this, or what if that happens? You just stop. But the moment you change that what if to wouldn't it be great if, the whole reframe changes and suddenly you get excited. Now, Henry Ford, he actually said, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't is always going to be right. And for those people in Dubai, I know you love accumulating wealth. There's a guy called Robert Kiyosaki, and he wrote a book I also came across, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he also talks about how we use language, and he talks about NLP without talking about NLP, to condition how wealthy or how poor we become. And it all comes down to, let's say you want to buy something. One person will say, I can't afford it. And the brain says, okay, you're right, you can't afford it. The other person will say, how can I afford it? And now the brain gets creative and innovative about how you can actually go do those things. And based in Dubai, the center of innovation, you could have sat there and said, hey, we can't do anything here because there is no vegetation, there is no water, there is no thing. So they went and said, well, forget about all that. We're going to say, how can we do these things? How can we make this possible? Wouldn't it be great if we could build this amazing city in the middle of nowhere and create this artificial island and attract one of the richest people in the world to it? Like, somebody had to think that. It's easy for 80% of people to explain why that wouldn't work and why it could be wrong. But NLP gives you the ability to scratch those poor patterns that you have. Get rid of the habits and become the person that you need to become by asking yourself the right questions and using language powerfully in a way that's going to help you to get the results that you deserve.
You know, this is very, for me, and I hope it will provoke the audience to think about it this way, because this is the first step. Questioning is the first step to do this reprogramming, and this is actually what I did, because I was actually talking to someone before we start recording this podcast, and I don't know why the topic came. And I said, I asked myself, should I stay behind a cubicle, doing the thing that I'm doing for the rest of my life, or is it worth to go and try to see if there's a better opportunity? And I was sure that there's a better opportunity somewhere else. And this is one of the main examples like that it happened to me because before I was saying, no, like things stay as the way they are, we cannot change, this. But when, of course, reading books helped me a lot. So, and of course, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad is one of the books that, of course, not because of the money concept itself, but actually, it's the art of the art of reframing. Of course, when he was mentioning, he didn't have two dads. Of course, he had one dad, but I mean, he tried to make and use like kind of storytelling in a very perfect way to get the message to us. So absolutely, Jamal, I really enjoyed. I really, love to talk more and more. And I think they're gonna be part 2, part 3 of this a series with you. But if today you want to leave a final message to fellow startup entrepreneurs and technology leaders, what would be the final thoughts and where people can find more about you?
Yeah. So my final thoughts, I would say, listen, you can be whatever it is that you can imagine yourself to be. That's all that's limiting you, is how wide your imagination can be. And just take me as living proof. I have no right to be where I am. In fact, if you wrote a story and you betted on it, you'd lose all your bets about how my life trajectory has. But it's all because I imagined it and I believed and I allowed myself to ask myself the right questions. So show up powerfully every day and focus on the things that matter. So believe in yourself, have confidence, and always ask yourself the right questions, because the quality of your life, the outcome of your life, is going to come down to the quality of the question that you ask yourself and your team. So ask powerful questions. To connect with me, the best place to connect with me, I would say, is on LinkedIn. I'm sure Mehmet will put me into the show notes, but come on LinkedIn, connect with me. And if there is anything I can do to help you or your consultancy from a data privacy point of view, from a coaching point of view, then please feel free to get in touch and we can have a conversation. And if it's just the coffee chat that you want and you want to jump on my podcast to talk about how great your product is to my privacy audience, then let's do that.
Sure. I will make sure that, of course, I do it all the time. I will put the links in the show notes so you can find Jamal easily. Jamal, again, one more time, thank you for your very valuable insights today. I really appreciate, you took the time to speak with me. And I'm sure that the audience will benefit a lot, whether from data privacy perspective or whether, the storytelling and the NLP perspective and the belief system that we talked about. And this is for the audience. This is how usually I end my episodes. So if you just discovered this podcast, and I am grateful that you are discovering it more and more, by luck, thank you for passing by. If you like it, please subscribe and share it with your friend and colleague. We are available on all podcasting platforms. And of course, we are available on YouTube. And if you are one of the loyal followers who keep coming, keep sending me their suggestions and questions, please keep doing so. I love to read all of them. I'm always looking to enhance myself and enhance the podcast. So please keep your suggestion coming. And if you are interested to be on the podcast, don't hesitate again to reach out to me. You know where to find me also as well. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll meet again very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hit that subscribe button. Share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs. And leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.